Welcome to our series, The Battle for Public Education in the 21st Century. I'm Ken Yale, education correspondent for Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio.
Yeah, feel this from the bottom of my heart, y'all. Truly inspired. Here we go, come on, look, yo, just teaching to the test, forced by the feds, or they losing that check. Too many children left behind by this corporate assembly line. How they privatize education is a human right, and their kids gonna be fine. They send them to private schools, while ours get sent to prison or given a job serving fast food, cash food.
Today's program is entitled The Power of Our History. Here's what Malcolm X said about the study of history.
Of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward all research. And when you see that you got problems, all you have to do is examine the historic method used all over the world by others who had problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight.
Today we'll explore two struggles for empowering history education, one inside the public school system and the other outside of it. We begin in the Tucson public schools. In 2012, national attention was focused on Tucson's school district when it decided to terminate a very successful Mexican-American studies program. This happened after the state passed a law prohibiting the teaching of ethnic studies courses, and the district faced the loss of $15 million in funding if the program continued. Norma Gonzalez has been a leader in the struggle for Mexican-American studies in Tucson for over 10 years. She was a curriculum specialist with the Mexican-American Studies Department when the state moved to shut it down. She is currently a third-grade teacher at Monzo Elementary School in Tucson. We join Norma Gonzalez as she describes the powerful impact the Mexican-American Studies program was having before it was targeted by the state of Arizona in 2012.
The impact on students is nationally recognized for its effectiveness in that the students that went through the Mexican-American Studies program, they were outperforming the European-American group, which is the group that traditionally does better on high-stake tests. So our students were outperforming them across the board in reading, writing, and math. And so our students were graduating and they were matriculating into institutions of higher education. So the impact was tremendous in that it was changing and it was challenging the status quo and what traditionally was the experience for Chicano students in our district.
Talk to us then about the events that led up to the district's decision to terminate the Mexican-American Studies program.
If you look at the politics in Arizona, Arizona is a very red state and it's an anti-Latino state. You had the superintendent of public education running on a campaign to eliminate Raza studies.
I want to parse out a little more clearly what the state was actually saying and then what you believe might have been the real reasons.
Legislation was created to eliminate our program. The state was claiming that we were in our classes planning the overthrow of the United States government. We were being accused of teaching the hatred of another group. We were being accused of ethnic solidarity, whatever that means, like if something that's wrong. We were audited. People were coming into our classrooms and they were investigating what we were doing. And they actually found that our classes were teaching critical thinking, that our students and the relationship with the teachers were outstanding and that they were respectable, they were reciprocal. And so that audit actually concluded that we were having effective practices in our classroom and that they should be replicated. So it backfired on them.
Now, the district, what was their stance in all of this?
The district was being threatened with reduction in the budget, $15 million. The sole person who could come in and determine if we were in violation was the superintendent, John Hupenthaw. And if he found that we were out of compliance, then the state would fine us $15 million. And so the district, they cowered to the state.
I understand that a number of books were also banned in the district at that same time.
In line with the legislation that said we were teaching the overthrow of the government, basically they were saying that these books did not follow with Western values. They were books that were promoting a Mexican or Chicano culture, and some of the books that they didn't allow in our classrooms were the book by Rudy Acuña, Occupied America, and they looked at the title, and that was evidence that we were going to overthrow the government. We were trying to regain Aztlán, and so, other books, The 500 Years of Chicano History by Betita Martinez, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which they claimed was teaching that people of color are oppressed. Those were some of the major books that were banned in our classrooms.
Wow. Well, there's a little short list of recommended reading for our listeners.
Yeah.
So describe the response of the community and the country to the attack on ethnic studies and the book bannings.
You can see our students, they were out at board meetings and talking to board members, and they were writing editorials to the paper. You really don't see high school students engaged civically, as much as our students were out there fighting for, what they believed is their right as human beings. We have the right to an education, we have a right to an equitable education, and we have the right to learn about our culture. Of course, in the community, we've had huge support in that we had leaders from the movement in the 60s and 70s that were coming out, and they were supporting us. Nationally, again, huge support because people are recognizing that this is a program that works effectively, that disrupts the status quo, that disrupts what the educational system has done for students of color. It's been real hopeful to know that people are out there supporting, this program and really what it means for the nation.
What's happened to Mexican American studies in Tucson since the district shut down your program several years ago? Is anything left?
The district is under a federal mandate, and the federal mandate has existed for, over 30 years to provide an equitable education. What has been created is a department that looks at the utilization of culturally relevant pedagogies and instruction to provide equitable and positive academic opportunities for students of color. The district's been very slow in providing what is required through the federal mandate.
I wonder if there's anything you'd like to share about what happened to some of the leaders of the program.
It was pretty vicious how the district came down on some of us. So 3 of us were fired and the rest of us were displaced. And, a lot of us have been working with the new creation, the Culturally Relevant Pedagogy and Instruction Department. And so we're kind of at the table again. But yeah, some of us, our livelihood was attacked. We were discredited. Our character was attacked. It was a tough couple of years initially after the program was terminated. I know that soon after our elimination, other programs were attacked at the university level, but yet other schools have been able to demand these types of programs with success.
What do you think are the lessons for those of us who support teaching history and providing education from a social justice perspective?
If you're going to teach from a different perspective, ethnic studies, women's studies, then you need to be ready to be scrutinized, because in that you're challenging the traditional view of history or the traditional curriculum, quote unquote. You have to have the courage to stand up to that scrutiny and to fight it. We know that having multiple perspectives is going to provide us, our students, our society, with a cross-cultural perspective on history. And so that makes for more compassionate, empathetic society. We need to fight for those programs that are really, truly liberatory, that are truly social justice charged and centered, and that are really going to impact and transform our communities and ultimately society.
We're going to leave Tucson now and hear some spoken word from Dante Clark. He's co-founder of Raw Talent, a performing arts group from the Rise Center in Richmond, California. Listen to this.
As morning dew glaze across cracked bottles and torn plastic and uncultivated soil, and a crammed space rumbles in appetite deep inside Section 8 housing beneath a rusted ceiling where iron tears in a quivering pit bellows off the cliff notes to Yah. Here lies a brown boy who awakes to a moldy frost setting into his bones. The third morning this week he struggled to climb out from his weeping puddle, searched through rubble for watered ground to plant his weary feet to pieces of watching his best friend's head explode in front of him. The sight, mind-blowing to say the least, don't you think? With scrawny shoulder and sinking faith, this brown boy carries 17 caskets and unfinished homework on his back as he drags himself through a thick cloud of purple smoke to stagger down a condemned pathway to the end of your classroom, cuffed in a black hooded sweatshirt made obituary. There in the corners where he folds, crumble at each tick of that clock, knowing that in here or out there on that block he is a waste. And the living usually forgets about the dead. And that's why these teachers don't see us. If slave ship and metallic lock is the only things planned in your lessons, then what's going to free us? How do you reach us with firm grip when your hands are full with holding on to Eurocentric lectures? Treat us absent when you don't feel connected to our presence. Can't call on raised hands of ghosts, so we float. Hallway glide to daunt at locker room gatherings for posts. We host school ground as purgatory. Pretend that diploma will exempt us from a white man's gun. Street sweep this poverty and teach us back our native tongues like really though. Like really know the people you're supposed to be serving. Or is it that you do know and you are afraid of our awakening? Either way, I am that brown boy. Each morning, someone like me enters your classroom. Outside of school hours is a prison cell and an early grave being carved and dug to stack profit when brown bodies decay. I don't need your sympathy, because your sorries is not gonna save me.
Now we go to Tierra Amarilla in the mountains of northern New Mexico. This area has a special place in Chicano-Mexicano history. In the 1960s, Tierra Amarilla was the site of militant demands for the return of land taken by the United States from Mexico. In the following decades, the community has resisted encroachment by wealthy developers. Since the 1990s, Chicano youth brigades from around the country have come to Tierra Amarilla for an intensive week that includes studying their own history and culture. Ricardo Romero is a co-founder and teacher of the Tierra Amarilla Youth Brigades. He has been a community organizer for over 50 years, and he is currently project coordinator for Al Frente de Lucha in Greeley, Colorado. We join Ricardo Romero as he describes the origins of the Tierra Amarilla Youth Brigades.
We got a call from New Mexico that they were going to take this Flores family off the land that they had occupied for like 15, 20 years. And so I went down and I met with Amador Flores. He wanted our support as the Mexican National Liberation Movement in occupying this land. And I told him, well, we could probably do that, but we have some things we have to really be straight up about. And we will not fight for land that belongs to heirs. We'll fight for land for our people and for our community. And so he agreed, and we went ahead and occupied this land, fought the developers that came in from Arizona, land developers that wanted to build a ski run and build these condominiums to make it a haven for rich folks from back east to come in the wintertime and have a pleasurable 2-week vacation. And based on that, we occupied the land for 16 months. They made us a deal and they offered us 217 acres of land and a monetary settlement. The Flores family took the monetary settlement and we created a consejo, a council, elders and young people, and we took the land. And so that's how that happened in 1990. From there, the idea came, well, we'll just create the youth brigades and we'll bring youth from the urban centers into the mountains of northern New Mexico, and we're going to create a curriculum and develop a school.
Who comes for the youth brigades?
We've had young people from Denver, from Greeley, from Pueblo, Colorado, from Chicago, Illinois for about a 4-year period. We had different gang members from the Latin Kings. This year we will have our first group from East LA, I think a high school group that's going to be coming. We had the Malcolm X grassroots come for 2 years from Georgia and Mississippi and down south. And it was a wonderful, beautiful experience because we taught them Mexican history and they taught us black history. That made it very positive.
So what actually happens at the youth brigade when students go there? What does a typical day look like?
It's very disciplined. We have one half day of work and half day of school. And you get up 5:30 in the morning. You go on a 2-mile hike to start the day. And then start your work. Brigades hauling water, cutting wood, cleaning the kitchen, cleaning the outside toilets, and then school in the afternoon.
And how is the school there different from the school that the young people are going to in their traditional public schools?
The essential part of the difference is that we removed the young people from their social conditions in the barrios and ghettos of the cities and brought them into this independent setting. We say it's the first liberated zone in occupied Mexico. And we teach to learn and we learn to teach. And so it's not a one-way street. Youth have so much to teach us about their social reality, and they don't have that opportunity in public schools.
And what about the actual curriculum compared to what they might learn in a traditional public school?
We teach an intensive week of Mexican history and culture. We have las siete culturas de las Américas, the Olmeca, the Maya, the Teotihuacanos, the Toltecas, Chichimecas, Zapoteca, Mixteca, and the Nahuatlacas. We have the Mexican Revolution. We have contemporary Mexico. We have white supremacy. We have La Mujer, the woman's class, and dealing with gender and all the different issues there. We started the program in 1990, and we have continued it this will be our 16th year. We raise our own money. This year it costs like $9,000 to take 65 students and 25 adults who are volunteers who come to help and to teach. It's not an easy task, and now probably over half of our teachers are students themselves who have participated and now have become the teachers.
Wow, that sounds amazing. What's been the impact on the young people?
What we really try to institute is confidence. Confidence in yourself, and confidence so that you'll speak up, speak out, and challenge things. One of our main teaching methods is critical thinking. If you become a critical thinker, then you're going to make analysis. You're not going to be just a pawn in anyone's game, or you're not just going to follow orders. You're going to have to understand what is viable for you as a human being and what role you play in the world as a human being and how you accomplish that. One of the key things that I try to do, like, for example, in my classes, I try to bring from the past to the present. 1,000 years before Christ was born, we invented the concept of zero, the Olmeca Maya people. And so why do we have so many problems with math? Why are we scared of algebra and astrology and trigonometry and all these things when our people were scientists and mathematicians and astrologers? And why do we have these problems today when that's our history? They're not taught that in the public schools. They hide our history because if we learn our true history, we're going to rebel against them. If we understand what they did to us and how they did it, we're going to demand social change, and they don't want that. As settler colonialists, the settler understands what he has to do to keep us in check. And as long as we're in that framework of his society, his structure, and abiding by his educational norms, we're helping to enslave ourselves. And so what we're looking for in the model that we have is to become free, to become critical thinkers, to be free thinkers, and not to accept all of these things.
What makes you most hopeful about the future?
The youth that we've touched base with, 850 kids, those are 850 minds. How about if there was 1,000 groups like us in the United States? And then you'd be talking about 850,000. There's a possibility. It's just how do you do it? And what are you willing to give up to get? The youth, they'll set their own course. They'll have their own direction. It's not going to be based on what I said and what I thought or what somebody else said and thought. It's going to be based on their own social reality and their social conditions. And I think it's going to be in good hands with them.
Let's leave it there for today. One of the books banned in Tucson is called Occupied America by Rodolfo Acuna. Occupied America tells the kind of story that many education officials in Arizona and education corporatizers everywhere don't want told in schools. It's a story from really not that long ago about how the U.S. dispossessed the land and lives of countless thousands of Mexicans to create the states of California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Utah, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. How did we get from there to today's narrative that the illegal aliens are not those who stole the northern half of Mexico and passed it along to their descendants, but rather illegal Mexicans who won't respect the borders established by that theft? The book Occupied America begins with this line: history can either oppress or liberate a people. To that we might add our demand for a social justice history curriculum that chronicles the stories of resistance to colonialism and empire and the movements for liberation through the centuries. Next week we'll take a closer look at the national movements fighting for social justice education. Many thanks to today's guests, Norma Gonzalez, Dante Clark, and Ricardo Romero, for sharing their deep insights and wisdom. Check out the Flashpoints website at flashpoints.net to hear all the programs and the full interviews used to make them. For Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio, I'm Ken Yale. The executive producer of Flashpoints is Dennis Bernstein. Technical director is Mike Biggz.